Hi there, I'm Todd Miller, 7-8 culinary arts teacher with Lakehead Public Schools. I've got another recipe for you to try today, but before we start, a few reminders. First off, if you're unsure about any of the equipment that you're going to be using, make sure you ask someone that has some more kitchen experience, especially when you're working around the stove, oven, and even the microwave. Make sure you understand how they work, and always have a pair of oven mitts handy, even for the microwave. Some of the equipment gets hot in there. If the recipe calls for the use of a knife, make sure that you're really comfortable using a sharp knife like this. Again, ask somebody that has some experience and practice first before using it for your recipe. Always hold the knife with a lot of conviction in one hand, and with your other hand, you want to make sure that you keep your hand in that claw position, kind of like you're holding a tennis ball. Always keep your hand curled back so that the knife doesn't come in contact with your fingertips. Before you start the recipe, make sure you watch the entire video, read the recipe entirely through, make sure you understand everything, and of course, get all of your equipment and your ingredients out first. It makes the recipe go a lot more smoothly. And finally, don't forget, you made the mess, you're in charge of cleaning up. Don't leave a dirty kitchen for someone else. So have a great time cooking. So today we're going to have some fun and we're going to make some pretzels. You can make your own homemade pretzels at home. Now these aren't the hard, crunchy ones that you find in a bag where the chips are at the grocery store. These are more big, soft kind of pretzels. Now the best way, the best homemade pretzels have an extra step that we're not going to do today, and that involves putting them in boiling water with some baking soda for a little bit first, and that does some amazing stuff to them. We're going to skip that part today, and they're still going to be fantastic. Okay, now we need two bowls. We need a bowl for our dry ingredients, not too many dry ingredients, and a bowl for our wet ingredients. So we'll start off with the dry bowl. We're going to have 2 cups of flour. So we'll add, I have a half cup measurement here, so I have to do it 4 times. Over scoop, and then with a knife, with the side of a spoon, or even just carefully with the side of your hand, we want to measure in our 2 cups of flour. So for me, that's 4 half cups. Because a half cup plus a half cup makes 1 cup, and then I have to do that twice. So there's my flour in the bowl. And then we're going to add some salt as well. We're going to add half of a tablespoon of salt. Now this is a tablespoon, so if you're really good, you could try to just get a half thing of salt in there. I'm not that good. I don't actually have a little spoon called a half tablespoon, but I do know that a teaspoon times 3 makes 1 tablespoon. So if I need a half tablespoon, if I use 1 whole teaspoon and another half of a teaspoon, that's the same as half a tablespoon. So we start off with 1 teaspoon and a half teaspoon. So 1 teaspoon plus 1/2 teaspoon makes half of a tablespoon. So we'll mix that up. And that is our dry bowl. Now for our wet bowl, we're going to be using something called yeast. Half of a tablespoon. So we'll put one of those in, and one of these in. There we go. And yeast is a living thing. Yeast is alive. Right now it's not really doing too much in the bowl, but yeast loves to eat sugar. So we're going to wake up the yeast a bit by giving it some sugar. So there's 1 teaspoon. Half of a tablespoon of salt, half a tablespoon of yeast, half of a tablespoon of sugar. Don't get your sugar and your salt mixed up. And then we need some water. Now we want the water to be about 40 degrees Celsius, which is just a little tiny bit warmer than our bodies. So if you have a thermometer at home, that's fantastic. I can use my thermometer to check and to see mine is at 39 degrees, which is pretty close, so that's fine. If you don't have a thermometer at home, if you put your finger in it, and my finger's very clean, it should feel about the same as your body. If you put it in, it feels, ooh, that's hot, that's too hot. If you put it in and feel, ooh, that's kind of cold, don't use it. You want to try to get it so it's about the same temperature body. Think like Goldilocks, and that will make the yeast happy. If it's too cold, the yeast won't eat. If it's too hot, the yeast will die. So stir that up a little bit. There we go. And we're just going to put that aside just for 30 seconds or so. We're using instant yeast, so we could start working right away if we want, but we'll just wait for a second. This is a half recipe. It's going to make about 6 to 8 pretzels. So if you want to double everything, multiply everything by 2, then you can make a full batch of pretzels. Now, before I started, I did turn on my oven, and we need a pretty hot oven for this, 425 degrees. So I want to give my oven time to heat up, so I've had it on for a little while first. Okay, so just wait for a moment or two. If you've got a bit more time, you can wait longer, but we're going to start right now. So now we're going to add our flour to our yeast mixture. But we don't want to add it all at once. In fact, we might not even use all of the flour. We want to add just enough until we get a nice firm dough that we'll see in a moment. Now, we don't know for sure how much we need because depending on how you measured, depending on the temperature outside, depending if it's raining or not, that changes how yeast, flour, water, how they all interact. So we're going to add 1/2 cup, sprinkle that on, and then we'll give that a stir. And of course, it'll be pretty watery still, which is a good thing. Always try to scrape the sides down. And then we'll add another 1/2 cup and give that a good stir. And now it's starting to become much thicker, a little more soupier. And then we add a third 1/2 cup. I'm not being as careful to measure right now, so I'm not taking off any extra on top. And now I have to be a little bit careful, more careful with my stirring, because now it's all starting to form together into one ball of dough. Still a little too sticky. I can see it sticking to the sides a little bit. So I want to add my last 1/2 cup, but I'm not going to add it all at once. I'll add about half of it and give that a stir. And now it's starting not to stick to the sides anymore. So I think I'm almost done. There we go. That's pretty good. I can feel it with my fingers. It's sticking to my fingers just a little tiny bit. That feels pretty good. All right. So I've got some left over, but that's okay because I'll still use it. Because now we're going to have to put a little bit on the countertop. So I'll sprinkle some of this flour that's left. If you used all your flour up, you just use a little bit extra from your flour bin. But I will sprinkle that up and I will scrape my dough out onto the countertop. And I'm just going to give it a little bit of a turn. Make sure it's not too sticky. Like that. Scrape it in the flour a little bit if I need to. We don't want to dry it out too much. But as you can see, it's not really sticking to my hands too much. That's great. And now I'm going to divide it up. First, I'm going to divide it in half. And then of that half, I'm going to divide that in half again. And then I'm going to divide it in half one more time. So we're going to have little pieces of dough like that. I'll just work with a couple. You'll, of course, work with all of yours. A little tiny bit sticky yet in the middle, so a little bit more flour. Now we're going to take one of these. We're going to pretend we're back in kindergarten playing with some plasticine at the plasticine station. And we're going to roll this out into a snake. We're going to roll it out into a snake. That's about 30 centimeters long. 30 centimeters is about the same length as the ruler that you have in your classroom back at school, where you're not right now. There we go. So, we've got it like that, and now we're ready to make it into our pretzel shape. So if you want to make a true pretzel shape, we have to do this. I've got my dough in a line with the points pointing out sideways, not pointing at me or pointing at you. And I'm going to pull it down until I have a U. So I've got a U now, and I want the U, so the bottom of the U is facing me. Now I'm going to take the tips, and I'm going to cross them over like this. One on one side, one on the other side. So when they get crossed over, show you again, cross one this way, cross one that way. You get your pretzel shape. And we're just going to push that down slightly, and then I'm going to put it on a pan. I'm using a baking pan here, and I've got some parchment paper on. It just helps to keep it from sticking and helps to make it easier to clean up. So I'll make one like that, make one more. Of course, you're going to make lots. I'll make the rest later. The magic of my video is I can turn this off and make some more. And get another 30 centimeter little snake going here. Now this time,
I'm not going to make a pretzel shape because you could make just a circle shape if you want. You can make a triangle shape. Try to make a hexagon shape. I don't think I'd be able to do that. Or you can make some letters. I'm going to try making the letter M for my name. So I make a little M on there like that, and then I'll put that on. And then you'll keep going and do all of them. So once you've got all of them done, we're almost ready to put them in the oven. Just one more thing we need to do. We've got to create a wash for them. So we're going to take an egg, crack it gently, pull apart so the shells don't break. Take a little fork, give it a good little stir, and we're going to add a little bit of water. There's a little bit of water left in here. 1 teaspoon of water. Just helps with the egg. And then we're going to put what's called an egg wash on top of our pretzels. So we can use a pastry brush like this if you have one. And then you just take it and you dip it in and you brush the top of your pretzel. If you don't have a pastry brush at home, no big deal. You can just use your finger and just gently, try not to push down on your pretzel. You don't want to splatten it out. Just get some of that egg on there, like that. And then finally, one thing about pretzels is they are very salty. Too much salt is not good for us, but salt in one pretzel is okay. If you have this kind of salt, kosher salt, it's really much thicker. In some places they call it rock salt. It's big chunks, almost bigger chunks you'd see at sand at a beach. If you have that kind of salt, you just sprinkle, not tons, just a couple of kernels on top. If you don't have this kind of salt, you can use regular salt, but just use a little bit, just a little bit of sprinkle on top. Now these are going to go into that hot oven, that 425 degree oven. They're going to go in for at least 15 minutes. Check them at 15 minutes. If they're nice and golden brown, they're ready to come out. If they're not, you're going to leave them in for about another 5 minutes. You can check them every minute. Try not to open the oven to check it each time because that'll take a lot of your heat away from the oven. Just try to look at it through the window. So I'm going to put these in the oven now, and then we'll come back and see what they look like. So my pretzels were in the oven for 17 minutes. I checked them after 15 and they still need to be a little bit more brown yet. Left them in for a couple more minutes, and now got a beautiful golden color. I can see a little bit of the salt on top, and it's really puffed up. So that's a pretty good looking pretzel. And the one that I made with an M actually worked out. So when you make them with letters, it works out pretty nicely too. Now the best would have been, before I put them in the oven, if I just let them sit for a while. Maybe with a piece of wax paper on top or cloth for about 30 minutes. That way the yeast would start to eat the salts before they went into the oven. But today for time, we put them in right away, and you can see they still look great. But if you want that extra step, you can leave them out for 30 minutes before putting them in the oven. So that's some pretzels. They're delicious on their own, or with a bit of mustard maybe if you want on them. They're fantastic to eat along with sausages, and they're fun to make all sorts of different shapes. So I hope you enjoy making soft pretzels, and happy cooking.